It started with a sound, the faint chime of glass against glass. A toast. A smile. The kind of smile that hides a blade behind it. My sister raised her wine and said, "Maybe if you worked harder you wouldn't still be stuck." The table laughed, a polite, poisoned sound, and for a moment the world seemed to tilt. She didn't whisper it. She didn't hesitate. Just a clean slice through the air, sharp enough to carve something out of me I didn't know could bleed. What they didn't see, what she didn't care to remember, was that every dollar that built her future had been earned with my exhaustion. 2 jobs, 3 sometimes. My fingers blistered from lifting crates in a warehouse by day and pouring coffee by night. Every shift was a promise. Her life will be better. But in that moment, as her words cut through the laughter, I realized what I had truly been funding. Not her education, but her illusion of superiority. That night when I walked home through the cold, something shifted. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was silence. A silence that hums like a machine hidden beneath the world. Because betrayal isn't born in families. It's learned. Copied. She didn't invent the arrogance that looked down on the working hands that carried her. She absorbed it, from the world. From a system built to make people like me useful, and people like her grateful only to themselves. That's when I started to see it. The pattern. The invisible script written into every conversation, every expectation, every thank you, that really means stay below me. It was never just about her. It was about how control works. You think you choose your life, you think you build it, but maybe you're just paying the tuition for someone else's illusion, funding a story that tells you your place. They call it family. They call it love. But if you listen closely, really listen, you can hear the hum behind it all. The quiet rhythm of a system that feeds on sacrifice, and calls the feeder a loser. After that dinner, the silence stayed with me. It followed me to work, hung behind the grind of the coffee machine, whispered under the hum of fluorescent lights. When customers smiled without seeing me, I began to notice the pattern again. The same mask my sister wore. Polite, confident, hollow. It's strange how blindness can look like certainty. They believed they were winning, climbing, achieving, but they all moved the same way, reciting the same language: success, progress, hustle. Words polished smooth by too many mouths until they lost all meaning. I started watching people's eyes. The moment someone felt superior, the pupils changed, just a flicker, a narrowing, as if a switch had been pressed. That's when it hit me. Power isn't always taken by force. Most of the time, it's given away in tiny concessions. A favor owed, a compliment returned, a silence kept. Every day I'd given away little pieces of myself, believing I was being kind. But kindness without awareness is a form of self-erasure. It teaches others that your time, your energy, your will are resources to be managed. That night, walking home again, I looked up at the skyline, steel and glass glowing like an altar. I imagined how many lives had been spent keeping those lights on. How many dreams were traded for rent, for reputation, for someone else's comfort. It wasn't evil that built those towers. It was obedience. The realization hit like cold rain. Control doesn't begin with chains. It begins with gratitude. The moment you thank someone for letting you serve them, the lock clicks. I thought of my sister again. Her laugh, her perfect certainty that she deserved what she had. But she wasn't the architect. She was just another believer. The system needs believers. It runs on them. That night, for the first time, I stopped being grateful. I didn't rebel, I didn't shout. I simply saw. And once you see, you can never unsee. Days blurred. Work, sleep, work again. Each one a copy of the last. Like pages from a book I hadn't chosen to read. But something had changed. The silence that once gnawed at me now whispered lessons. It spoke in patterns. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. Then I realized I was finding it. Everywhere I looked, I saw echoes of the dinner table. The supervisor who smiled too wide when demanding overtime. The coworker who thanked the company for opportunity while counting coins at the end of the week. It was the same theater. I didn't move. I just looked at him until he looked away. No words, no anger. Just a pause long enough for him to feel the weight of what he'd done. It was small, almost nothing. Yet walking back to the counter, I felt something expand inside me. A pulse of steadiness that didn't depend on anyone's approval. That's the real start of freedom, not rebellion for its own sake, but awareness so sharp that manipulation has nowhere to hide. At home, my sister called. She wanted to check in, her voice sweet with practiced guilt. For years I would have filled the silence, tried to fix whatever discomfort she pretended to feel. This time I listened. Every word was a transaction wrapped in affection, the same language I'd heard all my life. But when I didn't give her what she expected, the call ended quickly. It hurt. Freedom always does at first. It costs the relationships that depended on your submission. I began noticing the same pattern everywhere. How praise disguised expectation. How love demanded conformity. How help came with invisible strings. It wasn't that people were cruel. It was that they'd never been taught another way to connect. So I started testing a different way. Truth without performance. When a coworker asked why I was quiet, I told her, because I'm listening to how we talk to survive. She laughed, then paused, then nodded as if something in her recognized it. That's how awareness spreads, not through argument, but through resonance. Every day I walked a little taller, not proud but present. The city didn't change, the lights still burned, the traffic still roared, but the spell was weaker now. Once you see the machinery, it can't own you anymore. The city looked the same, but I moved through it differently now. Before, every streetlight felt like judgment. Now it was just light. I realized how much energy I'd spent measuring myself against other people's expectations, like running in circles inside an invisible cage. Power doesn't begin with control over others, it begins with control over attention. Where you place it, what you allow to feed on it. I had been starving myself for years, giving all my focus to being good enough. Now I aimed it inward, not in vanity but in inventory. I started writing, not to publish, not to impress, but to map my own mind. Page after page, I traced the beliefs that had been grafted onto me. Work harder, apologize faster, don't make anyone uncomfortable. Each sentence I crossed out felt like cutting a string from my spine. There was no grand epiphany, just small recognitions that built on one another until awareness became muscle. When someone dismissed me, I no longer felt the reflex to justify myself. When someone praised me, I no longer felt the need to earn it. The same silence that once made me feel invisible now made me unshakable. It struck me how easily power hides behind emotion. Guilt, pride, even love, each can be turned into a leash if you don't know where the pull is coming from. Real authority, I learned, isn't loud. It doesn't need to win arguments or collect followers. It just stands, rooted, unbothered, aware. Sometimes I would pass the cafe window and see my reflection, tired eyes, rough hands, and feel a strange affection for the man staring back. He wasn't a loser, he was the ground on which others had built their illusions. And now that ground was shifting. At night, the hum of the city became softer, almost human. I could hear it breathing with me instead of against me. Maybe the system never changes, maybe it's ancient, permanent, but the moment you see it for what it is, its grip falters, because awareness isn't rebellion, it's evolution. It started with small conversations, not speeches, not lessons, just a different kind of listening. At work, someone complained about the hours, the pay, the exhaustion. Instead of agreeing or offering sympathy, I asked, "When did you start believing this was normal?" They laughed it off at first. But the question stayed in the air like static. I learned that you don't wake people by shouting, you wake them by asking the question they've avoided. Questions rearrange the room. They make silence meaningful again. I stopped talking about change in grand terms. No revolutions, no movements. Just attention, the simplest and rarest form of rebellion. I told a friend, pay attention to who profits from your exhaustion. He frowned, then nodded slowly, like someone tasting water after salt. The more I practiced, the more I saw how easy it is to replace one cage with another. People love saviors as much as they love tyrants. They'll kneel for anyone who promises meaning. So I learned to resist that role too. I wasn't a teacher, I was a mirror. Sometimes, late at night, I'd feel the old anger return. The image of my sister's smirk, the echo of that word, loser. But anger had become something else now. It wasn't a fire, it was fuel, slow and steady. It reminded me why awareness mattered. Because unconsciousness multiplies harm. One blind insult can echo for years. One awakening can end a lineage of imitation. In quiet moments, I imagined her somewhere in her bright world, still certain, still performing. Maybe one day she'd pause long enough to wonder where her certainty came from. If she ever did, she'd start hearing the hum too, the low note beneath the noise that never stops. The more I listened, the clearer it became. Power doesn't disappear when you stop serving it. It transforms, becomes attention, presence, choice. That's the real secret. Not rebellion, reclamation. The call came out of nowhere. A new manager at the cafe, The same chain, higher pay, better hours. They said I'd earned it. It sounded flattering, almost generous. But the moment I heard the tone behind the offer, that syrupy mix of praise and expectation, I felt the hum again, deep and familiar. Power never knocks once. It tests the door, waits for gratitude to open it. And for a moment, I almost did. The thought flickered. Maybe this is what I deserve. Maybe this is progress. That's how it always begins, with a reward disguised as freedom. I met the manager in his glass office. He smiled like my sister had smiled at that dinner table, the same curve of certainty. He spoke in soft commands, wrapped in compliments. He told me how much potential he saw in me, how I could grow with the brand. Every word was bait. I listened, nodded, and felt the old reflex stir, the urge to please, to prove, to earn. Then I caught it, that tiny invisible chain being offered again. And I heard myself say quietly, I think I've already grown past needing it. His smile froze, a pause. Then the meeting ended, polite but colder now. Walking out of that building, I felt lighter, not triumphant, just awake. The world didn't applaud, no lightning struck. But something irreversible had shifted. Because power doesn't always try to crush you. Sometimes it tries to adopt you, to make you part of its shape. That's the harder test, refusing the crown that hides another collar. That night I walked home through the same streets, but they looked different again. Every sign, every light, every advertisement whispered the same promise. Serve, obey, become more. But underneath there was another whisper, quieter, older, mine. It said, be. Just be. And in that stillness I realized, freedom isn't a destination, it's a refusal that must be renewed every day. Freedom isn't a victory march, it's the sound of footsteps echoing in an empty hall. The first thing you lose is the noise, the chatter that used to define you. Without it, the world feels distant, almost unreal. For weeks, the city moved around me like a film projected on fog. Friends drifted away, unsure what to make of my quietness. My sister stopped calling. Even the cafe seemed to shrink. Conversations I once joined now felt scripted, predictable. At first, I mistook the silence for loneliness. But then I realized loneliness is what you feel when the false self dissolves. You're not alone, you're just meeting yourself for the first time without witnesses. There were nights I missed the comfort of ignorance, the simple clarity of being told who to be. But ignorance is a kind of sleep, and once you've tasted waking, even pain feels cleaner. I began walking the city after dark, studying the lights, the windows, the faces passing by. Every person carried a small storm of thoughts, worries, hopes, private worlds held together by habit. I wondered how many of them knew they were following invisible maps drawn by people long gone, and I wondered how many might be ready to redraw theirs. That thought became a kind of prayer. May they see it before it devours them. I stopped needing to explain myself. When people asked what changed, I said, I started paying attention. Some nodded politely. A few asked how. I told them the truth, by losing what I thought I was. The more I said it, the more it sank in. Awareness isn't an achievement. It's a shedding. You give up the comfort of being understood in exchange for the clarity of seeing. One night, under the dim flicker of a street lamp, I whispered to the empty road, I forgive you. I didn't know if I meant my sister, the system, or myself. Maybe all three. Forgiveness wasn't approval, it was release, and in that release I felt something vast move through me. Not joy, not sorrow, just peace. The kind that comes when you stop asking the world for permission to exist. Dawn arrived without ceremony. Light spilled across the concrete, the same streets, the same buildings. Nothing had changed, yet everything had. I walked past the cafe and saw my reflection in the glass again. For a heartbeat I remembered the version of me that once lived there, exhausted, eager to please, waiting for permission to matter. Now the face looking back was steady, unreadable. No anger, no need. That's the final stage of awakening, not rage, not triumph, but stillness. You stop trying to escape the world because you realize you were never trapped in it, only entangled by your own belief in its stories. I thought of my sister. Maybe one day she'd feel the same shift. Maybe she'd remember the brother who worked himself raw for her future, and finally understand what the word loser really meant. But I didn't need that apology anymore. Forgiveness isn't a gift for the other person, it's how you stop carrying the weight they left in you. The world still runs on its old machinery. Praise, shame, ambition, fear. It will always hum in the background, offering roles to anyone who will take them. But now I can hear the hum for what it is. Not a command, just a signal. and I decide when to listen. Some nights I still walk those streets. The glow of windows like constellations. Every light belongs to someone trying to make sense of their story. I don't pity them. We all wake at our own pace. If you've heard this far, remember this. Freedom isn't found in rebellion or obedience. It's in the space between them. The space where you can think, see, and choose without fear. Breathe there, stay there. Because once you've seen the pattern, you can never unsee it. And once you know it doesn't own you, the world's noise becomes quiet enough to reveal something else. The sound of your own will, steady and alive. That's the moment you stop being a story someone else wrote. That's the moment you become the author.